Okay, here we go. In theory, anybody watching this or the recording after this, I mean, you can skip the first few minutes, not the usual like 10, because this is going to be kind of quick. I need to head out and walk around in like 40 minutes or so. Oh, it's actually on the front page this time. Awesome. However, it did not preemptively mute me. So, YouTube, your AI failed. This is not where we go. We need to go out here, actually. Uh, oh, we have to go over here. There we go. Turn monetization on. Then we go back into control room, set to live chat, dismiss this, load. There we go. Okay. Dang, 6 people already. You guys jumped on that pretty fast. And this time, we don't have to bring up a bunch of stuff. We just have to, first, actually, move these into the projections folder because I hadn't done that yet. Come on, downloads. Population, yeah, that's it. Projections. So then delete the Bandicam screen caps and remove this one as well. And delete that. All right, that should be everything. I will name and label those later because I don't want to waste stream time doing that. So we have, okay, I'll give it 2 more minutes, maybe 2 or 1, and then I'm going to start because there's not too much that should be going on. And like I said, in about 40 minutes, I have to head out to make sure I do my usual hour and a half of walking around picking up everybody else's trash. But also, we are actually moving upwards again. We're getting dangerously close to the whole 10K sub count thing, in which case I would unfortunately have to make that cringy Who is Max Ogier stream that I promised like 2 years ago. But thankfully, praise our Father in heaven, my sub count has actually stayed right around this area for like 2 years until the last couple of weeks. It started, unfortunately, going upwards. So that might end up having to happen after all. Right, got less than a minute, then we're going for it, like every invading country is doing at the moment. And let's get a second tab up here. No, it's in streams. Tab. There we go. We are looking for down in here. Was that really it? Was that all of them? Or did I accidentally... Hold on, I might have accidentally saved some of them out in the normal download space. Did I? Yeah, I did. I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing. Okay. Transfer these, and then we'll start. Open, please, folder. Thank you. Move to streams. All right, X off that one. We have all those. Okay. So, I told you guys I've been working on making population projections for everybody. Actually, open this in a new tab so we can look at these. And I've been doing these by actually looking over looking over countries' actual, population pyramids and line keeping with the new generations and everything, and with the like older generations moving into age of death range, and doing, in kicking at the bottom over time via working with, the birth rates and accounting for continued decline of birth rates that are showing a trend of continued decline, at least. and also accounting for different immigration numbers and stuff for countries that do that. As some of you guys, like you, Australia, are uh, one of the ones that caused me some issues. Some of you guys, looking at you, Australia, and who else? Canada, looking at you, and the UK. Some of you guys are causing me some issues because you can't make up your minds. You, uh, you like, both Canada was normally taking in, I believe, like 400,000 new immigrants per year. Then 2 years back, you guys suddenly decided we're going to start taking in 1.2 million. And I was like, okay, well, now I'm going to have to adjust my projections for that. And this year, just as I was about to adjust them with that new number included, you guys uh, half 180. You did a 90 basically instead of a 180 and dropped back down halfway, not to your original 400,000 that was your norm for decades and decades, but you went halfway back down and said, actually, we're only going to do 800,000 per year. Okay, so then I had to readjust the projection for that number. And Australia, you guys did basically the same thing. The UK, you guys did basically the same thing. None of you guys will make up your minds and just stick with something. So you're making this difficult. But anyway, first we'll look at projections from, uh, UN Population Division and various countries' statistical boards, which are all still way out of whack. The considered to be most likely scenario by for the world by the UNPD is that we will still exceed 10 billion and that will basically, I guess, plateau indefinitely around 10 and a half. That is not going to be the case whatsoever. Where is it? Oh, here we go. The whole world. So, in reality, most likely, given how things are going at the moment, we are probably going to peak around 9.4 just after 2050, as opposed to reaching a 10.5 billion level around 2080, which is what the UN suspects, and then plateauing indefinitely. And we will then curve over slowly at first, but only because I stopped the graphs at 2075 so that, I could go for exactly 1 century, 50 years of actual numbers, and then 50 years of projection. So 75 to 75. Past 2075, it does start to curve over a bit steeper, but this is how it is looking at the moment without accounting for any potential catastrophic stuff, any actual World War III things, any of the stuff from the Book of Revelation. So not factoring in any of that. This is what things would look like thus far. This is, however, accounting for population growth damage being done by events currently occurring. So things like the Russia-Ukraine war and things like the ongoing developing famine in Sudan and Ethiopia, that is factored into this. But things that may yet to come, obviously, no, because I don't know when they're going to happen, and also I won't know what extent they're going to be, so I can't bring up stuff like that. And if you want to see the graph at like the actual visually presentable size, you'll probably have to full screen the stream. Sorry, I didn't mention that earlier because I forgot it's true it's streaming my whole screen, so this is actually going to be smaller in the YouTube viewer window. So you might have to full screen the stream to see the graph at like the regular size. But so yeah, proceeding as of current, we will peak out around, or rather, fall just short of 9.4 billion, and then start to curve out down towards 9 by 2075. And then, if this went past 2075, it would get a bit steeper heading down. and that is okay. That's theirs. I can't scroll one to one directly through those because some of them are web.pe files. Okay, do I have to go in here again for you to load with the stuff I transferred? There we go. Okay. Oh, no, that's Rus. I'm looking for a US without an R in front of it. So, moving on to individual countries. The US, uh, at least the US government, not the UN, but the US government, Congressional Budget Office specifically, has gradually adjusted their population projections down closer to what will be reality, although they are a bit they're a bit out there. They for some reason they think it's going to hit 374 million by 2046. That is not what's going to happen. They don't seem to take into account that there were a lot more boomers than the previous generation and the generation that the boomers then gave birth to. And the boomers are about to start dying in like massive numbers in over just the next coming years. That's about to pull back on the actual upward US track. So 374 is like close to where the US population will peak, but it's not going to be in 2046. It's going to take a bit longer to actually get up there. And who are some of the others? Uh, this is the US Census Bureau, who also is actually now, for their most likely scenario, their median is actually getting pretty realistic with it. And theirs looks pretty similar to what you will see on mine, although they're a bit more upwards with it. So exit out of that, and then we come over here, see the US. So yeah, this is basically it. We are currently at 336 million, although it's been a few months into this year, so we're probably closer to like 336.4 or 336.5. Actually, we're almost done with April, so yeah, it's probably more like between 336.5 and zero point 0.6. So the US is going to keep going up for a bit, and then it's going to be a much, much more gradual increase for a prolonged while. And uh, like highest point, like I've said before, is probably going to be more like maybe 367, but it's more going to be kind of plateauing out around towards like 360. But it will be a gradually, very gradually increasing plateau, just with a upward angular slope of like less than 1 degree, at least measuring out until 2075. And that is because here is the US population pyramid. And for most Western countries, it's around 80 is when you start massively tipping over into death. And this is from 2022. So move these bars up by 2 years, and the sudden outward jut here that then continues growing bigger and bigger in a slope outward with each year after that. The birth of the boomers. The first of those massively bigger bars will start crossing over into the past the age of life expectancy in move these up by 2. So in just 2 years, those will start crossing up over the life expectancy line. And so that will cut US average growth abruptly from 2 million per year on average down closer to 1, something like 1.2 or so, from which it will then gradually get smaller and smaller and smaller as each of these wider generation lines passes up past the life expectancy age, and will basically stay like that because then each of the generations down here is roughly of similar size, and it has a cut in at the bottom, primarily because, as I've said before, countries that do immigration, uh, usually immigrants when they come, for the most part, and I saw this with, or not saw, but I heard this from the three different people I know who immigrated here. Uh, the When families immigrate, they tend to not want to make, like, a country to country move while their kids are still like basically infants or like only 2 years old or something. They tend to want to wait until they're like, at least four, basically until they can walk on their own, kind of, and they're a bit more manageable. So, and I saw that with I've known three people whose family immigrated to the U.S. Uh, One immigrated from Costa Rica when he was 6, and his brother was, I think, 13. But they waited until he was 6, and then I've known two dudes back at UAF who one from Cote d'Ivoire and one from Nigeria, and they had their families both immigrated when they were like 4 or 5. So you for countries receiving immigration, uh, and with birth rates like closer in the upper ones instead of the lower ones, you will tend to see a flat up and down. But at the very bottom, you will see, once you hit around 5 years old, you'll see a sudden cave in, which is because families that immigrate, like I said, tend to wait until the youngest child is like past, at least say 4 or so. But that's the US one. But, excuse me, stay up, please. Then we have I did I not, or is it in the top group? It is in the top group. Okay. So, the as you can see, this is one of the ones from the UN. The population projections for from the UN are, much less realistic. For some reason, they have the US, they have us still going up until like 450. For some reason, they think China is going to like almost level out before even reaching going below 1 billion. They're pretty close with India, but they need to drop it down a bit. India's not actually going to go above 1.6. And Nigeria, they are way out there. They still have Nigeria as going up towards 1 billion, despite the fact that their fertility rate is on a very fast drop towards like uh, most modern nations levels. Nigeria is getting close to 4, and at the rate they're going, they will probably drop from 4 to 3 over the course of like just a decade or so. Once they hit a flat 4, which should be in a year or two, basically. So then after that, by the mid 2030s, they'll already be down at 3, and then by the mid 2040s, if not faster, they'll be at or below replacement rate. So they're not doing this like giga upsurge that the UN thinks they're doing. But so this is the UN's expectation for China, which is not what's going to happen. We'll get to what's going to happen in a second. Let me see if I had any others from them of multiple nations. No, no. Okay. So what's actually going to happen with China? I have shown you guys this one, I'm pretty sure at least. This is what China is actually going to look like. So they're already heading down. They peaked at 1.413 or 1,413,000,000. They fell down to, as of the start of this year, 1.409, 1,409,000,000. And by the end of this year, they will probably be down to 1.405. And then next year, they will probably go just below a flat 1.4. And from there, it gets steeper. There's a bit of a slowdown here because of the 1960s famine generation cave in. But then after that, it renormalizes and continues this steep, abysmal plummet. And instead of the more pessimistic calculations still saying China might fall down to like close to 500 million or 600 million by 2100, they're almost certainly going to be below 600 million by just 2075, probably around like 550, maybe 575 or so. So China is going for just straight up skydiving. The only one that's gonna go faster than them is South Korea. However, remember this does not take into account things that have not happened yet, but will probably have a significant effect. Like after China tries, most likely next year, with their whole Taiwan bouts and has to face plant as a result of that, and stuff kind of blows back internally and implodes. Their fertility rate is, instead of tying South Korea, as a result of all the various types of economic and other blowback from the upcoming theater show, it's probably going to dive down, like further towards like half or something like that. But this is the outlook as it presently stands. They are going for a 1/3 sizing over the next 50 years. Let me chug some water. Snaps off the USA. Uh, Nothing from chat. Surprising. Actually, not surprising. Chat is usually dead. You guys do tend to be dead. Uh, India. There are various different expectations for India. This one has them getting up to like 1.7. I think that's the same one as this one, actually. Which, okay, yeah. So this one have them or expects them to peak basically just under 1.7. However, the reality is something more like this. It's not as horrific as like China's implosion, but India is going to peak more around like one between 1.5 and 1 point, or sorry, 1.55 and 1.57 probably, and will level off for like a decade or two before curving out post 2055 or so, and will drop down towards like 1.35 by 2075, unless other factors come in or things change. Things like the loss of 20% at least of their agricultural capabilities once they deplete their groundwater aquifers in the 2040s. But again, I can't know absolute specifics about that, so I wouldn't be able to factor that in. Uh, what else did who did I want to go on to next? We'll stick with the populous nations, and then we'll go to everywhere where chat is from, at least for the most part. So again, with the Nigeria stuff, their birth rate is dropping pretty rapidly. It's not what everyone keeps basing these projections on. They will still get pretty high, but they're not going up to 800 billion, let alone 800 million, let alone 1 billion. The EU is also a bit over forecast. EU populations, it's going to be under 400 million by 2100. Sorry, guys, but that's the way it's going. In Nigeria's case, the actual outlook for Nigeria is something closer to this. They're likely to peak more around the mid 400s, and they're just, as you can see, the curve leveling off and curving out here just as it's hitting 2075. And again, this is not accounting for things that haven't happened yet, or things that could happen, as like say issues with global food availability, since by the By this point, they're going to be 50% import dependent because arable land wise, Nigeria is only capable of supporting about 200 million people, and they are using their arable lands. They do provide about 90% of their food themselves, but they're now up to like 225 million or so at the present moment. So they're now roughly 10% dependent on imports. And once you have a huge amount of nations with hundreds of millions of people dependent on imports, you are going to find eventually that not because it's impossible to provide that food, we could if we rearranged some stuff, but you're going to find that amount of excess food is just not available. But if there were no changes to anything and their fertility rate decline continued at its present rate, then accounting for the different expansions of different generational blocks still to come, then this is what they would look like, and they would curve out in the mid 400s or so around 2075 itself. Uh, Brazil is another one. I did not find, at least in time, I did not find any official projections for Brazil, but most of the ones I remember seeing a couple years back still said Brazil was going to peak all the way up at like 250 or 260. That is not the case, however. They're going to peak in the 220s. The higher ends would be something like 229. The lower end would be something like 221. This is assuming that Brazil's 203 million census number is actually truthful. So I'm giving Brazil the benefit of the doubt on that. But this is what their curve out should look like. They're going to basically level off by the late 2030s and stay that way until the late 2050s in the 220s millions area before then heading out on their decline curve. And they should be down to 200 million by 2075 or so. Of course, again, this is not factoring in any potential like upsurges in inbound migration or outbound migration, not accounting for any asteroid strikes or anything. Who else is large scale? Indonesia. So this is Indonesia's outlook. I believe I remember most of the UN projections for them are actually closer in line with reality now. They used to say Indonesia was going to peak at 400 million. Most of them have now dropped that down to like 340 or 350. In reality, though, Indonesia is going to peak more in the 310s, around like 313 or 314 or something like that. So, because their fertility rate is already now down below two, like many other Asian nations, faster than it was expected to. As I think it was expected they would go below two just before 2030 or something, but they ended up dropping down to like 1.9 as of this year or so. So they're going over like this, and they're similar to Brazil. They're kind of going to have a flat line there for like 2 decades, and then they're going to go into a slow, gradually increasing decline. And by around that looks like 2065 or so, they'll be back under 300 million. As of the present moment, they still are. They're at like 279, I think. Or since it's a quarter of the way through the year, they're probably at 279.6 or zero point 0.7. So that's how Indonesia is going. Canada, not one of the most populous nations, but one of the ones that troubles me because you guys can't make up your minds about your immigration policy. So, Canada, for some reason, various projections say Canada is going all the way up to like 70. Others say it's going up to 100. I don't know what kind of drugs you guys are snorting. Something with maple syrup, insert stereotype joke here. But this is what it's mostly going to look like for you guys as your demographic pyramid is about to hit the point where your larger, earlier generations are going to pass over the expected time frame of death. So that's going to tip you into, since unlike the US, you guys didn't stay in the upper ones. You guys are opting for a European or East Asian style birth rate. You guys are down to like 1.2 and seem to want to keep going below that. So you're about to tip into the frame of immigration being your only source of increase. And assuming that you keep the 800,000 per year number that you've set for to start next year, 2025, then using that and accounting for the continued decrease of that increase because your average number of people dying per year will continue going up and the new births per year will continue going down, even that won't keep you off forever. You're going to curve out over the next decade and a half, and you're going to come somewhere into the 50s, like mid 50s, and basically that's where it's going to level out. I think it ended up being somewhere between like 52 and 54, but I have to go dig through the Excel sheet, and I don't want to go digging through the Excel sheet to find the actual number. Ethiopia, similar to Nigeria, but a bit earlier, got cut off just before it was starting to curve out. They will not be going up to 500 million like the UN expects them to. They will actually, although from a different starting point, starting down here at 120 something million, uh, they will be they will be peaking around the same area as Indonesia, just decently later. So the pyramid style of their population pyramid will still carry them upwards at a decent increase rate, despite the fact that their fertility rate is also rapidly decreasing, just like Nigeria's. But once they pass 2060, you can see they start curving out, but you'd have to carry the graph out further to see the curve like finalized. So they will peak between like, 300 and 320 million if nothing else happens, which a lot of stuff will, because this, I didn't account in here for whatever the total damages end up being from their fracturing into multiple states later, and the, vast amounts of death and starvation that's probably going to come from that, and anything else that could happen. Like if, the East African volcanic rift line, that continental divide rift line, just opens up massively, like the Siberian traps did a long time ago, then that would probably kill a lot of people. But no way of knowing whether or if that's going to happen. So this is how things would look if all follows through as expected. Who else do we got? Egypt is a big one. They are not going up to whatever absurd number they think they are. Although they've adjusted stuff down to, I think, only expecting 160 million in total. But really, they're going to peak closer to 150, more in the mid 140s or so, like 146 or something like that. Again, I'm not saying those as exact numbers. I'm just saying like 146 or something like that. This is what they are going to look like if everything stays currently as is. Their rate of outbound migration, for example, remains the same, and their rate of fertility decline continues at its present trajectory, as they're down to, I think, uh, they're they're down under 3 now. They're in the upper twos at like 2.8 or 2.75, I think, and they are making their way down. But they still will carry up like this for a while because of the size of the generations that were born back when their fertility rate was like 4 or 5. But they will end up peaking close to 2075, but coming short of 150 million. Mexico. Wait, did someone just chat for the first time? Oh, never mind. It's Josh. Sorry, I didn't text you about this one. I wasn't gonna bother you with it because it's gonna be really fast. Like I'm aiming to finish it within the next like 15 minutes. I will have for those who are not Josh who are listening. I will have all of the population projection graphs of all the countries that I do. I will have those in a similar slideshow style video to the inflation rate stuff and the birth rate graphs. So the stream is just going over some of the major countries and countries that members of chat are from. Let me chug some more water. So Mexico's fertility rate is already down to like 1.8 or 1.7, which is not where it was expected to go. A lot of people didn't think they'd go below 2, but they did. And so they're going to be curving out very soon and are probably going to peak more around 140 or so, as opposed to the 160, I believe, that the UN still expects of them. We'll throw in Iraq. Iraq, everyone still keeps putting projections as going up to like 150 million or something ridiculous like that. I think the more inline ones still from the UNBP or UNPB are still saying like 100 million, but in reality, with their rates of outbound migration and their rapidly dropping fertility rates accounted for, they are more going to curve out very shallowly like this, around like 70 something million. Anyone else major or large? The Congo. Congo is one of the only ones that's going to keep going up for a decent while, as their fertility rate is dropping, but it's still above 5, and it's going to take it a couple decades to get down towards 2. So they, instead of going linear like this, it will be leveling them out, or sorry, logarithmic like this. It will be leveling them out to a linear increase, and their curve outs or their beginning of a peak starts around 2080 or so, which is after 2075, where the graph cuts off, obviously. So the Congo, barring anything else happening, which stuff will happen, a lot of stuff's going to happen. But, not accounting for any super volcanic eruptions or asteroid strikes or anything else from the Book of Revelation, uh, Congo will be going up towards about 400 million by 2075. And who else? Was there anyone else of major? Oh yeah, one of the other major super decreasers. I forgot. Japan and South Korea. Some of the ones Chad would most likely want to see. So Japan is most likely, unless they suddenly start doing a lot of immigration intake. Currently, their cap is 200,000 per year, I believe. And they kind of secretly, not on paper, but kind of secretly only accept immigrants from other Asian nations. So most of the immigrants to Japan are from like Vietnam and the Philippines and Thailand. So they are already on their downslide, and it's going to get steeper, and they're going to be going down like this. And by 2075, they're going to be down around like 40 million. Whereas I think, no, we over here. Whereas they it is okay. So this is from Japan's Institute of Population. Whereas they are still trying to be a bit too optimistic with themselves and are saying they're only by 2100 or so, they're only going to be down to like 50 million or so. Whereas they're going to be down to like 40 by just 2075. That's just the way it's going. Unless, stuff changes. Stuff could always change, but it's not really looking like that's something that's going to happen. For the projections for South Korea, most of them are still, at least we'll say the median ones are still kind of thinking South Korea's only going to be down to around 25 million by 2100. some of the lower end expectations are getting closer to reality. But again, if the birth rate doesn't suddenly jump back up to two, or they don't suddenly start taking in like, 500,000 immigrants a year or something, this is what's happening to South Korea. Okay. They got to face this reality. They are taking one of the steepest dives on the planet, and they're going to be more around 10 by 2075. I think the actual number I ended up with was around 9.5 million from a current population of around 51 million. They got close to 52, and they've been declining for about 5 years now. Now they're down to about 51, and they're going to continue at this rate for like another 5 years up until about 2030, which is when the generations fold and they start going into this omega level dive. So, for any Koreaboos out there, as opposed to weeaboos, uh, this is uh, this is the future of South Korea. So maybe they'll let you move in and help balance that out. Vietnam is, like I've said this before, going to peak in the 100 and teens. They're already starting to curve out as their increase last year was only between like 950,000, as opposed to the average increase they've had for the last decade before that of a little over 1 million. So they're going to gradually level out like this and kind of stay meandered in this area for almost 3 decades, 2.5 decades, around the 100 and teens, lower 100 and teens millions. Before then, after 2050, they're going to start making their way down. And they look more like this instead of a South Korea style nosedive because their fertility rate has actually stayed around two. It has still decreased over time, but it's decreased very, very gradually over the course of, I think, 3 decades. It's gradually decreased from 2.1 down to now 1.9 or so. So they are declining very, very slowly in terms of fertility rate, which is why they're going to look like this instead of looking like South Korea. Russia is, especially in their own projections, one of the most delusional. Here's one of the more wide range ones. Is this from, okay, this one's from the UN, and even they're a bit unrealistic with this. So by 2100, they're only on the lower end of their most likely projections, expecting Russia to be down at 110. On their absolute lowest expectation, they allow for apparently 85. Whereas this the one from Yeah, from the Russian Statistics Service itself. They up to 2036 only expect themselves to go down to 142.5, something that they are actually just about at right now. Uh, and on their lower expectation for the next 10 years, they only expect to drop down to 135. Now, that for 2036 is actually pretty close, but that's on the lower end of their expectations. So, what is actually going to occur for them is something like this. They are going to go down to around 75 or upper 70s by 2075. So if you extended this out, it does shallow out after that. So if you it gets to the shallow part here. So if you extend it out to 2100 on the actual graph, it would probably be down around like 65 million or so. But they're in their down curve now, and that was the Crimea intake. And I did not factor any uh, loss of Crimea into this as a potential thing, but I did account for something that Russia itself does not in their data that they publish, which is the net loss of about 1.7 million people fleeing the country since the war started, plus war deaths. So that is where that drop there comes from. And then, assuming nothing else happens afterwards. So, again, with the eventual fracturing of Russia, that is going to cause like another massive 90s style wave of outbound migration. I did not factor that in because I don't know what the numbers or extent of that will be, obviously, but not including that, assuming everything carried on from this point here as normal, this is what Russia's projection ends up looking like. And actually, uh, they're already starting to spook a lot of the immigrants that they were receiving from the post-Soviet Central Asian republics, as there's been a lot of suspicion and animosity turned their way ever since the Moscow theater attack. So now a lot of them are starting to return to their home countries out of fear, and also particularly in St. Petersburg, the like border authorities there are just like randomly rounding them up like in the streets and sending them back. So Russia is kind of accelerating this of its own accord. Who else did we have? Was there anyone else here? Any others? No. Okay. All right. So that's the end of needing those. Oh, uh, we did off note. We did get a new Patreon on or patron on Patreon. Jonas from Denmark, and I believe I'll actually have to add Denmark to the list of countries that someone in chat is from. I might have to update that map. But so this is the Patreon map thus far, with the different categories being mild oil exporters like Ecuador or Argentina, uh, decent oil exporters like Brazil or now Guyana, which is why it's now in that category. And Jonas signed up for like $5, so he's in that category. And then there's the Persian Gulf exporter category, because I based the Patreon map on oil exporters, not producers, exporters. There's the Persian Gulf category, which includes many of the Persian Gulf nations, not all of them though. Like Qatar is too small of an exporter to count, and Oman is not in the Persian Gulf, and also its numbers are smaller. Russia is in the Persian Gulf exporter category, even though they're not in the Persian Gulf. So one of the new guys, Brandon, who recently signed up, got assigned as Russia because I didn't want to deal with having to try to squeeze vector lines in to point at Kuwait just yet. And so Jonas got assigned Guyana, and when the end of the month comes, if that proves true and the charge goes through, then he will keep a hold of Guyana. Uh, and we don't need those anymore. I don't think I'm going to be doing any demographic pyramids. But moving on from those countries that people in chat are from, we'll go through real quickly. So, Turkey is already starting to curve out, and while a lot of projections seem to still have them going up to like 106 or something, they're gonna be curving out in the 90s and actually are coming in lower than I initially thought, as their fertility rate is going down faster than it originally had been. Like the dive from 1.9 down to 1.6 has been much faster than the previous dive from like 2.2 down to 1.9. So they're probably going to level out more in the lower 90s in terms of millions. The UK, a lot of chatters from, or at least a few. So the UK is going to continue upwards for a little bit, but then actually I accidentally lied. Forgive me. We are going to look at this. This is from 2020. So move these bars up by 4 years. So almost there already to 80, or the average death range for Western countries or modern countries. So your boomer outcrop and then enlargement here is about to start dying. So for the UK, it's going to go up for a couple of years, but then level out like this. And since your fertility rate is still going down, assuming you keep the same, although increased slightly number of immigration, this is how you guys are going to turn out. You'll be back down just under 60 million by 2075 after peaking at just over 70 million versus I don't know whether it's the UN or the British government's expectation graphs that see the UK still going upwards, and by like 2075 is up at like 85 million or something. That would only happen if you guys went up to like a million immigrant recipients per year or something like that. Uh, Back over to projections. Spain, we do have a somewhat frequent commenter from Spain. So Spain, España, this is your future. You have not started your nosedive yet, but you're about to. You have had some rounds of immigration that have held off your initial dive, but just like other Western European countries, your massive expansion of boomer generation is about to start dying. So even if you maintain like a more open borders thing, which you're going in the opposite direction of, it would not really stop everything, but it would make it maybe slightly less steep. But this is what you're going for. So you're going to curve over gradually at first. You're going to hit 40 million sometime just before 2050, and then you'll be in this pretty steep dive and starting to get a bit more shallow, though, as you round out towards 2075. But by 2075, you're going to be down to about 20 million, barring anything else happening, obviously. Norway, I surprisingly have a lot of people from Norway. This is Norway's current direction. Same as with many other Western European countries, the big boomer wave is about to start dying. So even if you do other things, it's going to basically look like this. You're going to peak close to 6 million, probably like 5.8 or 5.9, and you'll level out there for a decent like 2 decades or so before you start heading down. And you'll be back down around 5 million or so. We're a bit below it by 2075. Again, unless things change and other stuff happens. Somalia, since I do actually have multiple commenters from Somalia, apparently is declining infertility rates, is now down to about 6. And at the rate that it is going down, factoring that in along along with outbound migration rates and factoring in the few decades in which generational blocks will still increase in size comparative to the last ones, Somalia comes out looking like this, from about 17 or 18 million right now up to uh, starting to curve out towards 2075 at about 70 million, with a peak likely coming at around 75 million. And granted, things will happen and it will probably end up being lower than that. Also, this would end up being kind of problematic, just like with Nigeria and the others, for the whole food import situation, because Somalia does not utilize as much agricultural land as it could. But even if it did, Somalia land-wise would only be able to feed about 25 million. So this would be two-thirds dependent on food imports. Granted, Somalia at the moment is almost 100% dependent on food imports, and not even imports, but actual like food aid from the UN aid organization at the moment. But barring nothing else happening, it would end up peaking probably around 75 in the 2080s. Other countries where chat is from, where some people in chat are from. I think Deutschland have a few. Deutschland is a larger immigrant recipients country. However, they have announced that they're going to start cutting back. I think their cutbacks are going to amount to about 20 or 25% less received per year. So, accounting for that and accounting for your demographic block structure, this is what you're looking at. Still going to stay around the mid 80s for another few years, but then you're tipping over and heading down back under 75 before 2050, and you'll be back down around 60 or under 60 million by 2075. Anybody else where you guys are from? Australia. I forgot about Australia. Here is Australia. So, after upping your immigration numbers, you guys are now reducing them back down, not completely, but close to what they were before. And accounting for that, then this is what you should look like. Should be something like this, as if we account for Australia's demographic structure, move these lines up by 1 year, and you have a few more years before your boomer expansion starts dying. And then the generational blocks get obviously bigger and bigger with each year you go down further. That will then be passing into the age of death frame. And eventually you'll have this bigger block here dying out, which is what causes you to have this brief, sharper curve right here towards the very end. But you guys should be doing something like this, going up towards 30 and kind of leveling out there, maybe pushing into the lower 30s, but not certain. However, again, this could all change because you could suddenly change your immigration numbers again, like you've done 3 different times over the last 2 years. So, you guys could just keep causing me problems like you always have. All right. Anywhere else? Ethiopia. France, I don't think I have any commenters from France, but I probably have viewers from France. France is already essentially peaking right now. It's going to fall short of 70. It's going to look something like this, and then tip over into a very, very gradual decline. Since France's fertility rate has stayed, like the US, in the upper ones, below two, but still in the upper ones, and France has a steady rate of immigration, so France will see a decrease, but a much more gradual one than many other European countries will. And they'll be back down towards 60 million by around 2075 or so. Did I have anybody else? Oh, well, since we have a new patron from Denmark, probably should put Denmark on here. Denmark has leveled itself and been gradually still going up, primarily because of immigration intake, but it's about to get outweighed by the older generations hitting their life expectancy. And so, barring anything else happening, Denmark is about to start doing this, curving over gradually as you head towards 2050 into a much steeper decline. And because you guys had some awkward generational size wobbles, your curve is going to be more wobbly like this. And by 2075, it's going to be down around like 3.5 million for Denmark's population size. Who else did I have in here? No one that, well, a lot of people in chat probably ask about Niger since they have the highest birth rate in the world. Not anymore, actually. They've fallen below the Central African Republic, but the Central African Republic's population itself is so low that uh, even with their higher fertility rate and taking a long time to go down, they're not really going to go anywhere. Niger, if nothing happened, which stuff will happen, if nothing happens, then Niger would go up from 27 million today up to 250 million or so by 2075. However, Niger is already dependent on a lot of imported food, and this would be, putting it in like the 99% category, which that food is not going to be available. And also, the government that installed itself by a coup is going to get couped again because that's what happens to couped governments. And the whole place is not, it's just not going to keep holding together. And so they're going to continue having larger outbound migration waves. And so this is not actually going to materialize. It will start to look something like this, but eventually the whole food issue thing, especially, is going to get to it. But if food just magically appeared out of nowhere infinitely, then yes, this is what you would see Niger's population do. Okay, what was I doing? I was looking through these to see if there was anybody else. Uh, Czech Republic, yeah, still holding, but about to hit the point of the older generations dying. So even though the Czech Republic receives a lot of immigrants from the other Eastern European nations, just like Poland does, still going to tip over. Although you're going to kind of level out a bit, closer to 6 million. And then, uh, who else do we have who chats a lot? Sweden. Sweden chats a lot. Sweden is going to wobble like this for a bit. Around just under 11 million. But once you hit about 2040, you guys are curving over to into a very gradual decline, and you'll be down around like 9 million by 2075. Anybody else chat wise? Oh, well, a big country population wise that I forgot, Pakistan. Pakistan is going to be leveling off sooner than people expect. There's a lot of projections that still have them going up to like 500 million, but they're in reality going to be peaking out around like the mid 300 millions or so. And I think, I don't know whether it's their own governments or whether it was the UN's, but one of them actually started getting in line with reality and is expecting like 370 million, which is actually about what they're going to do. And you can see that sudden that bigger upsurge that was in the sudden flow of inward migration they experienced in the fall of Afghanistan. Although they are starting to deport a lot of those people back to Afghanistan now, so now I'm going to have to factor that into this. But this is about what Pakistan should look like, and anywhere else chatters are usually from. Yes, we already did Canada. But like it's the stream is essentially also a recorded video, so you can go backwards through the whole thing. New Zealand and Romania are the only other places I think I have usual chatters from. So Romania had a little bump from Ukrainian refugees that have decided to stay, but that's about it. Sorry, you guys are getting right back down to this, and you're going pretty steep. I'm pretty sure most of you were already aware of this, but you're going to get pretty steep. You're going to be like the European South Korea, and you're going down to like 6 or 5 million by 2075, unless something changes and a bunch of people start moving into Romania. And then for New Zealand, you guys are basically looking similar to what Australia is going to look like, and you're going to level out around like 7 million or so, and stay pretty steady there, assuming your immigration numbers do not increase or decrease. If they change, then I'll have to factor that in. But please don't be annoying like Australia, Canada, and the UK are constantly changing their immigration numbers. Please don't do that, New Zealand. Please stay the same. Make this easy on me. I'm begging you. And I think that's it uh, for all the major countries and for countries that I have frequent chatters from. So if I do have chatters from other countries that have not been done yet, and you fail to speak up, that's on you. But I will give like 30 seconds of the delay time if anybody wants to ask anything or super chat anything. But then I'm going out walking because I've already blown this past 20 minutes, past when it was supposed to end. And Thursday, potentially Thursday, might be Friday, I'll be doing the regular news and stuff stream. I'll just X this off entirely, actually. X off you, X off you. And if you're streaming tonight, Josh, I will be back in like an hour or so. Or I'll try to be back in an hour or so. Right. I don't think anybody's going to be saying anything. It's been about 30 seconds. All right, so that's where we're ending this one. So this is effectively the stream effectively served as kind of a preview. I have about 70 or 80 countries done. Once I have all 140 countries that I'm willing to do, because remember, I'm not doing the islands, I'm not doing micro-states like Monaco or Andorra or San Marino. I'm not doing Liechtenstein, not doing Malta, not doing Bahrain. So all 140 countries that I'm willing to do the projections for. Once I have those, I will make the basically a slideshow video of all their projections, like I did for various other graph types. But that's it this time.